The snow started falling harder the moment the radio went dead, and I remember thinking that was the wrong kind of quiet, not the silence of a station shutting down for the night. The silence of a room where everyone stopped talking at the same time because they heard something you didn't. My name is Halvard Renner. For 19 winters, I ran the deep field logistics for the Lamar Valley Wolf Study, which is a long way of saying I was the man who drove the supplies in and kept the generators running when the temperature dropped low enough to crack a fuel line. I'm 53 years old. I have arthritis in both hands and a satellite phone that only works if you stand on the north corner of the porch. And on the night the station went silent after midnight, I was 40 minutes out on a snow machine coming back from a collar battery swap when Dana's voice cut off mid-sentence. She had been telling me the coffee was cold. That's it. That's the last normal thing I heard from inside those walls. The coffee was cold, and then there was a sound like a chair going over, and then nothing. Not static, nothing. Somebody had keyed the mic off. I want to say something before I take you the rest of the way into that night, because I don't tell these stories lightly, and I know some of you have been riding along with me for a while now. Thank you for that. If you're new here and this kind of slow, cold dread is what you came looking for, stay a while, leave a comment, and let me know you're out there in the dark with me. It helps more than you'd think. Now let me get back to the valley, because what I found when I reached that station was worse than the silence. I killed the throttle a quarter mile out and coasted the last stretch on momentum, the way you do when you're not sure what you're driving into. The station sat in a shallow bowl of land at the base of a ridge. 3 buildings and a fuel shed, all of it wrapped in a chain-link perimeter that the study had put up 2 seasons back, not to keep people out, to keep the collared animals from wandering into the compound and getting habituated to us. That fence had never once felt important. A 4-foot chain-link square with a swing gate and a padlock we mostly left hanging open. Every light in the main building was on. That was the first wrong thing. We ran on generator power out there, and nobody left every light burning at once because it ate diesel, and diesel was the one thing you couldn't just drive to town and buy in February. Dana Chorney, who ran the research side, was tighter with the fuel budget than anyone I'd ever worked with. She'd chew you out for leaving a headlamp on, and yet the whole compound was lit up like it was trying to be seen from space. The second wrong thing was the door. The main building had a heavy insulated door, the kind with a lever handle and a foam seal to keep the heat in. It was standing open, wide open, banging soft against the outer wall in the wind. And the snow was already drifting across the threshold in a little white fan, which meant it had been open a while. 10 minutes at least, at that rate of fall. The heat we paid for in diesel was pouring out into the night, and nobody had gotten up to close it. I sat on the idling machine for a long moment. I'm not a brave man. I want that understood from the start. I'm a competent man, which is a different thing. Competence is knowing your fuel range and your radio protocol and which way the wind carries sound. Bravery is walking toward an open door when every part of your body is telling you to turn the machine around and drive back into the dark. I didn't have the second thing. I only had the first. But there were 4 people inside that building, and one of them, Donna, had been talking to me about cold coffee 90 seconds ago. And you don't leave 4 people because your gut is cold. I shut the machine down. The silence that rushed in was enormous. Just the wind and the door tapping the wall. And somewhere up on the ridge, a single wolf that started a howl and cut it off halfway through, like it had thought better of the whole idea. I walked up to the open door, and I said her name into the light. Donna. Nothing came back. But I could see into the main room from there. and I could see that the chair had gone over, just like I'd heard. And there was a coffee mug on its side on the plywood floor with a brown stain spreading out of it. Still wet, still steaming faintly in the cold air that was rolling in through the door I was standing in. And I could see the radio. Our base radio, the good one. The one with the range to reach the ranger station at Tower and the county line beyond it. Its handset was off the cradle and lying on the desk, and its face was dark. Somebody had switched it off at the panel. You don't switch off a base radio in an emergency. You scream into it. I stepped inside. And that was the moment the night stopped being a strange event and became the thing I have not been able to stop reliving for the 11 months since. Let me tell you who was supposed to be in that building, because the count matters. And because by morning, the count would be the only thing anyone from the outside cared about. There was Dana Chorney, 41, the lead researcher, and the reason the study existed at all. She'd fought 3 separate funding bodies to keep the collaring program alive, and she knew every animal in the 2 study packs by its gait. There was Wesley O'Teen, her field tech, mid-20s, a Blackfeet kid from up near Browning, who could read snow the way I read a fuel gauge, and who had, in the 2 months I'd known him, never once panicked about anything. There was Corinne Baugh, a veterinarian on a winter rotation from the state, 61, dry as sandpaper, the only one of us who'd ever set a broken bone or dealt with a rabid animal up close. And there was a man I'll call by the name he gave us, Peter Lund, because I still don't know if it was his real one. He'd arrived 3 weeks earlier with paperwork from a contractor doing an environmental survey for a pipeline reroute study. And he'd been sleeping in the spare bunk and eating our food and being generally useless and pleasant in equal measure ever since. 4 people, plus me made 5. And the station was built for 6, which mattered, because when I did the count that night, standing in that lit-up room with the coffee steaming on the floor, I could only account for none of them. The main room was empty. The chairs, the desk, the long table where they logged the day's tracking data, all of it sat there under the buzzing lights with nobody in any of it. I called out again, louder, and I heard my own voice come back off the plywood and the corrugated ceiling, and I heard, underneath it, a sound I couldn't place at first. A wet, rhythmic sound, coming from the far end of the building where the 2 bunk rooms and the little clinic space were. A sound like someone dragging a heavy wet coat across the floor, over and over. I need to explain something about the wolves, because it will matter. And because I've had 11 months to understand what I didn't understand that night. The study had been tracking a sickness in the northern pack since December. Corinne called it an atypical neurological presentation. Wesley just called it the wrongness. And I think Wesley's word was closer to the truth. It started with a coyote that Dana found staggering in circles at the edge of the compound in the 3rd week of December, walking into the fence over and over, not afraid of us, not afraid of anything, its jaw working like it was chewing on something that wasn't there. Corinne put it down and took samples and shipped them out on my next supply run. The lab came back confused. Not rabies, not distemper. Something they didn't have a clean name for. Something that ate through the parts of the brain that handle fear and pain and self-preservation, and left the rest of the animal running on pure hunger and pure aggression. Over January, we saw it in 3 more animals. A fox. Then a young wolf from the northern pack, one Dana had collared herself as a pup, that came down out of the tree line in broad daylight and tried to get through the chain link at Wesley while he was refueling the generator. And kept trying, tearing its own muzzle open on the wire and not seeming to feel it, until Corinne shot it. That was the day the fence stopped being a formality. That was the day I started thinking of the compound as a place with an inside and an outside. And here is the thing that I have turned over in my head 10,000 times since. The sickness did not spread the way a disease spreads. It spread the way fire spreads. Fast and by contact. And the animals it took did not get sick and lie down and die. They got sick and got up and went looking for something to bite. Corinne had a theory, and she said it to me once on the porch while she smoked a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have, that whatever this was, it wasn't really a disease at all in the way we meant the word. It was a passenger. It rode the animal and drove it and used it to find the next animal. And the animal itself was already, in every way that mattered, gone. So what happens, I asked her, if it gets into something bigger than a wolf? She looked at the tree line for a while. Then she said, "Let's hope we never find out," and put out the cigarette on the porch rail and went inside. I was thinking about that conversation as I walked down the hall of that lit-up building toward the wet dragging sound. I had a headlamp in my coat and a folding knife on my belt, and absolutely nothing else, because I was a logistics man coming back from swapping batteries. And it had not once occurred to me on the drive in that I might need a weapon in my own station. The hall to the bunk rooms was maybe 30 feet long. Plywood on both sides, insulation batting showing through where nobody had ever finished the walls. The lights were on here too. The first bunk room, Wesley and Peter's, had its door open and its window open, which made no sense in February until I got close and saw that the window wasn't open. It was gone. The whole frame punched outward, glass and cheap aluminum lying in the snow outside, and the wind was coming straight through into the building. Somebody had gone out that window in a hurry, or something had come in. The dragging sound was coming from the clinic. I want to tell you, I went in there like a man in a movie. I didn't. I stood outside that door for what felt like a full minute, with my hand on the folding knife, listening to that wet, rhythmic drag. And I said very quietly, "Corinne?" Because the clinic was her space. Because if anyone was in there hurt, it would be her trying to help them. The dragging stopped, and in the silence after it stopped, I heard breathing. Slow, deep, deliberate breathing. The way an animal breathes when it's smelling something and trying to decide what it is. And I understood, standing in that hallway with my hand on a knife I had used maybe twice in my life to cut anything but rope, that whatever was in that clinic was not a person who needed my help. It was on the other side of the door, and it had heard me say Corinne's name, and it was breathing me in. I backed up the hallway one slow step at a time. I did not turn my back on that door. And when I got to the main room, I finally saw the thing I'd walked right past on the way in, because I'd been so fixed on the empty chairs and the fallen mug. There was a smear on the floor. It ran from the mouth of the hallway across the main room and out the open front door into the snow. Dark and wide. And I don't need to describe it more than that. Something had been dragged out of this building, or had dragged itself. And it had gone out into the dark, toward the fence, toward the fuel shed, toward the 3 other buildings where the rest of my people had to be, if they were anywhere at all. That was when Peter Lund's voice came out of the storm. "Halvard, do not move." I've thought a lot about how relief and terror can be the exact same feeling. Arriving in the exact same second, Peter's voice was the first human sound I'd heard since Dana told me the coffee was cold, and every muscle in me wanted to go toward it. But there was something in the way he said it, low and flat and coming from off to the side of the door rather than from any of the places a person would naturally be, that kept my feet where they were. "Peter," I said, "where are the others?" "Don't come out the front," he said. "There's one between us and the shed." Come out the side, through the storeroom, and don't run. It goes for movement. Now, I need you to understand the geography, because everything that happened for the rest of that night turned on it. The main building had 2 exits. The front door, where I was standing, which faced the open bowl of the compound, and the fuel shed and the gate. And a side door through the storeroom, which faced the generator building, and, past it, the little bunkhouse annex we called the coop. Between the front door and the shed, out in the dark, Peter was telling me there was one of the sick animals. And Peter himself was somewhere off to the side, out of my sight, telling me to trust him and come out the other way. I went to the storeroom. I moved slow, the way he'd said, and I felt like a fool doing it, moving in slow motion through my own station. But I'd heard that breathing behind the clinic door, and I wasn't inclined to argue with the one man out there who seemed to know where the danger was. The storeroom was where we kept the food, the fuel additives, the spare parts, and the drug cabinet Corinne used for the animals. I got the side door open, and I stepped out into the snow. And the cold hit me, and there was Peter, pressed against the outside wall of the building. And even in the bad light, I could see he had our second radio, the handheld, clipped to his coat. And I could see he had a rifle. Corinne's rifle, the one we kept for putting down sick animals, the one that lived in a locked rack in the clinic. He'd been in the clinic. He'd gotten the rifle. And then he'd shut the door on whatever was still in there, and come around the outside of the building. And now he was standing here telling me to come to him. "Where are the others?" I said again. "Dana and Wesley made it to the generator building," he said. "Corinne didn't make it out." He said it fast, in one breath. And he didn't look at me when he said it, and I filed that away without knowing yet what it meant. "We have to get to the generator building, now, while it's on the other side." "What happened here, Peter?" "One of the wolves got in, the window." He was already moving, backing along the wall toward the corner, keeping the rifle pointed out at the dark. "It came through the window in the bunk room. Dana had the door open to check the weather. It was fast, Halvard. It was so much faster than they said." Some of that was true. I know now which parts. But standing there in the snow, all I knew was that 4 people had been reduced in the span of one radio call, to 2 in a generator building and 1 behind a closed door, and 1 man in front of me with a rifle that wasn't his. And I followed him, because what else was there to do? If stories like this are your kind of thing, this is about the point where you should ask yourself what you'd have done. Standing at that side door with the wind screaming and a stranger holding the only weapon telling you which way was safe. The generator building was 40 feet away across open snow. 40 feet does not sound like much. In the dark, in a storm, with something out there in the bowl of the compound that could cross ground faster than any of us, 40 feet was a country. We went along the wall to the corner, and Peter stopped, and we both looked out across that open stretch. The generator building had 1 window, a small square of yellow light, and against that light, I could see shapes moving. 2 of them. Human shapes. Dana and Wesley, I thought. And something in my chest let go a little. They were alive. They were 40 feet away, and they were alive, and all we had to do was cross. "On 3, Peter said. "Walk fast, don't run. When we get to the door, they'll open it. I already told them we were coming." "You've got the radio," I said. "Tell them now." He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. But I'd spent 19 winters watching men make decisions in the cold, and I knew what a hesitation like that meant. It meant the thing he was about to say was not going to be the true thing. "Battery's low," he said. "I'm saving it." We crossed. I won't stretch it out. We walked fast across 40 feet of open snow in the dark, with a rifle pointed at nothing we could see. And the whole time, I was waiting for something to come out of the black at the edge of the light, and nothing did. And we reached the generator building. And Peter pounded on the steel door with the flat of his hand and called out. And after a moment, the bolt drew back, and the door opened. And warm, diesel-smelling air rolled out, and there was Wesley O'Tine's face, young and gray and wrong. He looked at Peter. Then he looked at me. And the first thing he said, before hello, before, "Are you all right?" before anything, was, "You said you were bringing Corinne." The generator building went very quiet, or as quiet as a room with a running diesel engine ever gets. Which is to say, the engine kept hammering away in the corner, and everything human in the room stopped. Peter Lund stood in the doorway with the snow melting off his shoulders and the rifle in his hands. And he did not answer Wesley O'Tine's question. He came inside, and I came in behind him. And Wesley shut the door and threw the bolt. And I got my first good look at where the survivors of the Yellowstone Wolf Research Station had gone to ground. The generator building was the strongest structure in the compound. Steel walls, concrete pad, one door, one small window. It had been built to protect the equipment from the animals and the weather. And now it was protecting the people. Dana Chorney was sitting on an overturned fuel drum against the far wall with a first aid kit open in her lap and her right hand wrapped in gauze that was already spotting through red. She looked at me the way you look at someone you were sure you'd never see again. Wesley stood by the door. And in the corner, on the floor, wrapped in a sleeping bag and shivering, was a fifth person I hadn't accounted for at all. A kid, maybe 19, 20, skinny, dark-haired, wearing a coat that didn't fit him, and I'd never seen him before in my life. "Who is that?" I said. "That's the reason none of this makes sense yet," Dana said. Her voice was steady, but there was an effort in it, the effort of a person holding themselves together by main force. "Sit down, Halvard. We have maybe an hour before the fuel in the day tank runs out and the heat goes with it. And we need to decide some things. And you need to know what's actually happening, because Peter here has been telling everyone a slightly different version of it." Peter set the rifle down against the wall, muzzle up, careful, the way a man does when he wants everyone to see he's not a threat. "Dana," he said, "this isn't the time to—" "It's exactly the time," she said. "Halvard just walked in from the field. He's the only one of us who can still leave. So he's going to hear it straight." I sat down on a coil of hose. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. I looked at the kid in the sleeping bag, and I looked at Dana's bleeding hand, and I looked at Wesley by the door, who kept glancing at Peter like he was watching a snake. And I said, "Start with Corinne. Where is Corinne?" Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Wesley said, "Quiet. She's in the clinic." Peter closed the door. "Is she alive?" "She was bit," Peter said. "In the arm. Bad. She was already turning, Halvard. You didn't see it. It happens fast, faster than anything. 1 minute she's talking, and the next, her eyes go. And she comes at you." I closed the door because there was nothing else to do. She'd have gotten all of us. "He closed the door," Wesley said, "before we knew if it was true." And there it was. The thing that had been sitting under the surface of everything since I'd walked into that lit-up building. The 5 of us in that generator shed were not a group of survivors. We were a group of people who no longer trusted the man holding the rifle. And the man holding the rifle knew it. And the heat was running out. Dana told me the story while Wesley watched the window, and Peter sat apart from all of us near the rifle. She told it in the flat, careful way of a scientist reporting a result she wishes were different. And I'm going to give it to you the way she gave it to me, because the shape of it matters. The kid in the sleeping bag was named Emmett. He was not a researcher. He was not a contractor. He was a hiker, a college kid from Bozeman, who'd come into the backcountry 4 days earlier on a winter trip he had no business taking alone. And he'd been bitten. Not by a wolf, by a person. He'd come across a man on a trail up near the northern range. A man he described as sick, staggering. And the man had grabbed him and bitten his forearm before Emmett got away and ran. And he'd walked and stumbled through the snow for 2 days, with a fever climbing until he found the lights of our station. And Wesley had let him in. "You let him in," I said. "He was freezing," Wesley said. "He was a kid alone in the dark. What was I supposed to do?" "That's not a criticism," I said, and I meant it. I'd have done the same. But here's what Corinne's samples had told us in December, and what none of us had let ourselves say out loud until that night. The sickness had jumped. It had gone from the coyote to the fox to the wolves. And somewhere out there in the 2 months we'd been watching it burn through the animal population, it had found something bigger than a wolf. It had found the man on the trail who bit Emmett. And Emmett had carried it, walking, feverish, for 2 days, straight to us. "He turned in the main room," Dana said, "about 20 minutes before you got here. We were all sitting there. He'd been quiet, sleeping. We thought he was just exhausted. And then he was on Corinne before any of us understood what was happening. She got him off her, but he'd bitten her. And then Peter had the rifle, and Peter..." She stopped. "I shot the kid," Peter said. "That kid, not the one in the corner. There were 2. I looked at the sleeping bag again, at the shivering figure in it, and a cold understanding started to come up through me. "There's your problem, Halvard," Dana said, very quietly. So quietly I almost couldn't hear it over the generator. "Peter shot Emmett in the main room. Emmett is dead. He's the smear you walked past. Peter dragged him out the front door." She paused. "So, who is in the sleeping bag?" I want you to sit with that for a second, the way I had to, because I did the same thing you're doing right now. I looked at the figure in the corner, and I did the math, and I felt the floor of the whole night tilt underneath me. "His name is Sable," Wesley said. His voice had gone very careful. "He came in with Emmett 2 days ago, 2 of them, not 1. Peter keeps saying 1 because Peter..." And here Wesley looked straight at the man against the wall. "Peter doesn't want you to know there were 2, because Peter's been telling you the bite situation is contained, and it isn't, because this one's been bitten too. And Peter knew it. And Peter let him sit in that corner anyway. The generator hammered in its corner. The heat washed over us, and I realized I could feel it starting to thin already. The day tank draining, the temperature in the steel box preparing to fall." I looked at Peter Lund. "Is that true?" "He's not showing symptoms," Peter said. "Emmett was bitten deep in the meat of the arm. This one got a graze. It's different. He might be clean." "Might be?" I said. "There's no way to know," Corinne would have said, if Corinne had been in the room. If Corinne hadn't been behind a closed door 40 feet away, turning into something none of us wanted to think about. And that was the whole horror of it, laid out on the concrete floor of that generator building. We had a sick station. We had 1 confirmed turn behind a door, 1 dead body dragged out into the snow, 1 bitten stranger shivering in a sleeping bag who might be clean or might be a bomb with a fuse we couldn't see. And we had a man with a rifle who kept adjusting the story to make himself look like less of a liar than he was, but none of that was the betrayal. Not yet. The betrayal was quieter than any of it, and I wouldn't find it for another 20 minutes. And when I did, it would be in an empty crate. I'm going to ask you something here, and I want you to actually answer it in the comments, because it's the question I've never stopped asking myself. That kid in the sleeping bag, sable, bitten but not yet turned, maybe clean, maybe not. What do you do with him? You've got one warm room, a draining fuel tank, and no way to know. I still don't know if there's a right answer. Tell me where you're listening from, and tell me what you'd have done. We had to talk about the fuel, because the fuel was the clock. And the clock was the only thing in that room that didn't care about any of our decisions. The generator building ran off a day tank, a 50-gallon reservoir that fed the engine and that we topped up by hand from the main fuel store in the shed across the compound. Standard practice was to keep the day tank full and refill it every evening. But nobody had refilled it that evening, because that evening had gone the way it had gone. And when Wesley checked the sight gauge on the tank, he came back with a number that put a floor under all of us. About 40 minutes, he said. Maybe less. It's cold, the engine's working hard. 40 minutes of heat. 40 minutes of light. And then the steel box we were sheltering in would start to become the same temperature as the storm outside, which was somewhere south of zero and dropping. And Dana had a hand wound, and Sable's fever. And none of us had our full cold weather gear because none of us had planned to be trapped in a generator shed at 1 a.m. The fuel was in the shed. The shed was across the open bowl of the compound. And somewhere in that open bowl, according to Peter, there was one of the sick animals. And behind the clinic door in the main building there was Corinne, or what had been Corinne. And the whole compound was ringed by a 4-foot chain-link fence that had been designed to keep collared wolves from wandering in. A fence I had never once thought of as a wall, and which I was now realizing was the only thing standing between us and whatever else the sickness had gotten into out there in the dark. "The fence," I said. "Is the gate closed?" Everyone looked at me. "The perimeter gate," I said. "The swing gate by the shed. Is it closed and locked, or is it hanging open like it always is?" Dana's face changed. Wesley's changed a half-second after hers, and I understood that in the chaos of the last hour, with a boy turning and a vet bitten and a body being dragged across the floor, not one of them had thought about the gate. Why would they? The gate had never mattered. The gate was a formality for animals we were studying, not a defense against animals that were hunting. "It's open," Wesley said. "It's always open." "Then anything that comes down off that ridge walks straight in," I said. "There's no line. We're not inside anything. We just think we are." That fence became the center of everything from that moment on. And I want to explain why. Because it's the promise the whole night turned on. The station had gone silent, and I'd spent the drive in imagining a mechanical failure, a radio outage, some fixable thing. But the silence hadn't been a failure of a machine. It had been the silence of people who'd realized, all at once, that the walls they trusted weren't walls. That the inside they thought they occupied was the same as the outside. That the gate had been open the whole time. Corinne had told me once that a sick wolf couldn't reason, but it could remember. It could remember where it had found food. And every animal in that valley knew our compound was where the humans kept the smells of meat and warmth and blood. If the sickness had gotten into more than one of them, and if that fence gate was standing open the way it always stood open, then the compound wasn't a refuge at all. It was a bowl full of light and heat and the scent of us, sitting open at the bottom of a ridge full of things that no longer felt fear. "Someone has to close the gate," Dana said. "Someone has to refill the day tank," Wesley said. "Or none of it matters, because we freeze." "Both," I said. Both things are in the shed direction. The gate's by the shed. Whoever goes for fuel closes the gate on the way. I looked around the room. It has to be me. Why you? Peter said. Because I'm the only one who came in from outside, I said. I've still got my full field kit on the machine. Bibs, boots, the good gloves. The rest of you are in indoor clothes. If anyone's crossing that yard twice, it's the one who's dressed for it. That was true. And it was also the smaller half of the reason. And I think Donna knew it. The larger half was that I trusted the four of them to hold that door for me, a lot more than I trusted myself to sit in that room and watch that boy in the sleeping bag and wonder every second if his fever had crossed the line yet. Peter picked up the rifle. I'll cover you from the door. You'll give me the rifle, I said. The room went still again. Peter looked at me over the top of it, and for the first time all night, I saw the real Peter Lund come up behind his eyes. The man underneath the pleasant, useless contractor who'd been eating our food for 3 weeks was only there for a second. But I saw it. A cold, quick, calculating look. The look of a man deciding how much a thing is worth to him. I'm the better shot, he said. You're the one who closed a door on a woman who might have still been herself, Wesley said. You're the last person who should be holding the gun that decides who's saved. I saved all of you, Peter said, and his voice cracked on it. And that was the first true thing I'd heard him say, because it wasn't a lie, it was a wound. I shot that kid before he could take the whole room. Every one of you is breathing, because I did the thing none of you could do. And you want to talk to me about doors. Nobody had an answer to that, because it was true, and it was also not the whole truth. And we all knew there was more of it we didn't have yet. I stood up and held out my hand for the rifle. And Peter looked at it, and looked at me. And I watched him run the arithmetic of the whole situation behind his eyes one more time. Then he handed it over. He handed it over too easily, is what I thought at the time, and I was too focused on the yard and the gate and the 40 minutes of fuel to understand why. I understand why now. He handed it over because the rifle was never the thing he was protecting. The rifle was the decoy. The thing he was protecting was in the storeroom, in a crate, and I was about to walk right past it without knowing it was gone. I geared up at the door. Wesley helped me get the bolt ready to throw the second I was through. Dana gave me the plan in short, flat sentences because Dana, under pressure, became more precise, not less. Cross to the shed. Close and chain the gate first. It's 10 feet past the shed door. Then fill the 2 jerry cans from the main tank. Then back. Don't run. If something comes, put your back to the shed wall and use the rifle because a sick animal comes straight in and doesn't dodge. Corinne had told us that in December, and Corinne had been right about everything. And Corinne was behind a door 40 feet away. And I tried not to think about that. How many rounds? I said, checking the rifle. Peter answered from across the room. Should be 4 in it. I worked the bolt. There was 1 round in the chamber. I dropped the magazine. It was empty. 1 round, not 4, 1. I looked up at Peter Lund across that generator building, and he looked back at me, and he did not look away. And in that moment, I understood the first layer of what he'd done, though not yet the worst of it. He'd handed me the rifle so easily because he'd already stripped it down to a single shot. 3 rounds gone somewhere, into his pocket most likely. A man who decided, somewhere in the last hour, that the ammunition mattered more to his own survival than to the group's, and had quietly seen to it. 1 round, Peter, I said. I fired 3 at the kid, he said. He wouldn't go down. Maybe. It was possible. A panicking man empties a rifle. But Wesley was staring at Peter now, with an expression I'd never seen on that calm young face. And Wesley said, "You fired once. I was standing right there. You fired once and the kid went down and you dragged him out. What happened to the other 3 rounds, Peter?" "Then the box was low when I loaded it," Peter said. "I don't know. Does it matter? He's got one. One's enough for one animal. Go." I had a choice right there. I could have made it a fight in that room over 3 rifle rounds, with the fuel draining and the heat thinning. Or I could have taken my 1 round and gone out into the dark and done the job while the group held together behind me. I took the 1 round. I told myself it was the right call, that the crossing couldn't wait, that we could settle Peter Lund's arithmetic when the gate was chained and the tank was full and everyone was warm. Tell me if I was wrong. Tell me if you'd have turned around and torn that room apart looking for 3 rounds of ammunition first. There are nights I think I should have. I went out into the storm with 1 bullet, and I chained the gate, and I filled the cans, and I came back. And while I was gone, Peter Lund did the thing that I will carry for the rest of my life. But I have to tell it in order, because the order is the horror of it. The crossing to the shed was the longest 90 seconds of my life, and almost nothing happened during it, and that's exactly why it was so bad. I went out the side door and put my back to the steel wall and let my eyes adjust. The compound was a bowl of blue-white snow under a sky the color of wet slate. And the wind came down off the ridge in long shoves that threw curtains of loose snow across the open ground. Every light in the main building was still burning. It stood there 40 feet to my left, lit up and open-doored. And I knew Corinne was in it. And I made myself not look at the black rectangle of that front door for longer than a second at a time. The shed was to my right, maybe 50 feet. A low building with a fuel store and the swing gate beyond it. I went along the generator wall to its corner, and then I had to leave cover and cross open ground. And I did it the way Dana said. Fast walk, rifle up, 1 round in the chamber, and my thumb on the safety. Halfway across, I heard the howl again. The one from the ridge, the one that had cut off short when I first arrived. Except now it didn't cut off. It ran up, and then a second voice came in under it, and a third. And I stopped in the middle of that open snow, with my heart going like the generator, and I understood that there was a pack up on that ridge, and it was awake, and it was calling. A healthy pack howls to find each other and to mark territory. It's one of the most beautiful sounds in the world, and I'd heard it 1,000 times in 19 winters. And it had never once frightened me. This was not that. This was ragged and overlapping and wrong, voices that didn't answer each other so much as pile on top of each other, and it went on too long, and it didn't resolve into anything. Cortante. Corinne's word came back to me. Wrongness. That's what was on the ridge. A pack that had stopped being a pack and had become a number of separate hungers that happened to be standing near each other. I reached the shed. I did the gate first, like Dana said. The swing gate was standing open, chain hanging from the post, and I closed it and threaded the chain through and clipped the padlock. And I want to tell you that when that lock clicked shut, I felt safe. But I didn't, because I'd just spent the crossing understanding exactly how much a 4-foot chain-link fence is worth against something that will tear its own face open on the wire and keep coming. The gate was a gesture, but it was our gesture, and I made it. And then I went into the shed and filled the 2 jerry cans from the main tank, 40 gallons of diesel that meant hours of heat and light. And the whole time the pack was screaming on the ridge, and I was doing pump handle math in my head. How many strokes? How many minutes? How long is the crossing back with 40 pounds of fuel in each hand, and only 1 round in the rifle slung across my back? When I came out of the shed with the cans, there was an animal at the fence. It had come down while I was inside. It stood on the far side of the chain link, 20 feet from me. And it was one of the northern pack. I could tell by the collar, one of Dana's collared wolves. And it was pressed against the wire with its whole body, pushing, its muzzle working through the gaps, and it made no sound at all. That was the worst part. A healthy wolf that close would be a riot of signals, a wordies and ears, say signs, ears and tail and posture, all of it readable. This thing just pushed against the fence in total silence with its eyes fixed on me. And where a wolf's eyes should have had something behind them, there was nothing. Just the reflection of the compound lights. And its jaw kept working, chewing the cold air. And a thin line of black came off its muzzle where it had already worn itself raw on the wire. I did not have enough rounds to spend one on a thing that was on the other side of a fence. I made myself remember that. 1 round. I picked up the cans and I walked, fast, back across the open ground, toward the generator building. And behind me, I heard the fence sing as the wolf threw itself against it. And I heard it come off and throw itself again. And I did not look back, because looking back is how you stop walking. I reached the side door and I kicked it twice, the signal, and the bolt drew and the door opened, and I fell inside with the cans, and Wesley slammed it and threw the bolt. And for a second, I just knelt there on the concrete, with the diesel fumes in my nose and my whole body shaking. Then I looked up, and I counted the room, the way I'd counted the empty station an hour before, and the count was wrong again. Dana, Wesley, me. The kid in the sleeping bag, Sable, still shivering in the corner. No Peter. "Where's Peter?" I said. Wesley's face told me before his mouth did. He said he was going to check the day tank connection, in the back, 2 minutes ago. He pointed at the far end of the generator building, where a low partition separated the engine and the tank from the space we were sheltering in. "He's back there." I got up. I left the fuel cans by the door, and I went to the partition. And I went around it. And the back of the generator building was empty. And there was a second door I'd forgotten about. A small hatch we used for engine maintenance that opened onto the north side of the building away from the compound. And it was open, and the snow was coming in through it. And Peter Lund was gone. And so was the day tank fuel line. He hadn't gone back there to check it. He'd gone back there to cut it. Let me explain what I found, because this is the Betrayal, and it's quieter than a gunshot, and it did more damage than the whole sick pack on the ridge. The day tank fed the generator through a rubber fuel line and a shut-off valve. When I came around that partition, the line was disconnected at the valve, and the last of the day tank's diesel was running out onto the concrete in a black spreading pool. And the generator was already starting to labor, coughing as it pulled air. Peter had opened the maintenance hatch, disconnected the line, and slipped out into the storm on the north side of the building where none of us would see him go. But that wasn't the part that stopped my heart. The part that stopped my heart was the crate. We kept a crate in the back of the generator building, a hard plastic supply crate, and in it lived the compound's emergency kit, the real one, the one Corinne had assembled in December when the sickness first showed up. In that crate were the last of the sedative doses she used on the animals. The county radio spare battery, fully charged, the one that would have let us reach the ranger station at Tower, a flare kit, and the master key to the vehicle shed where my truck sat, my truck with a full tank and a heater and a road out of the valley. The truck I hadn't taken tonight because I'd gone out on the machine for a short battery swap. The crate was open. The crate was empty. Peter Lund had taken all of it. The spare radio battery, the flares, the sedatives, and the truck key. He'd taken the fuel line off the tank so the heat and lights would die, and we'd be blind and freezing and busy trying to survive. And in the chaos of that, he'd walked out the maintenance hatch with the only means we had of calling for help, and the only key to the only vehicle that could carry us out. I stood there, looking at that empty crate with the diesel pooling around my boots, and I did the arithmetic that Peter had already done an hour before. Sitting quiet against that wall while the rest of us argued about doors. He'd been planning this since he understood the fuel was finite. Maybe since he understood the boy in the corner might be a bomb. Maybe since the moment the first kid turned in the main room and he saw which way this was all going to go. Peter Lund had looked at a station with too little fuel, too little ammunition, one working vehicle, and one radio battery that could reach the outside world. And he had done the math and concluded that all of those things divided among 5 people came out to numbers he didn't like. And that all of those things kept by one person came out to a clean escape. He didn't kill anyone. I want to be fair to the truth of it, because the truth is worse than murder in a way I've never been able to shake. He didn't raise the rifle at any of us. He didn't have to. He just took the fuel and the radio and the key and left us in a steel box at 1 a.m. with a sick pack on the ridge and the heat draining out of the walls. And he let the valley do the rest. He left us with the math. And the math, once he'd taken his cut of it, said we had maybe 15 minutes of engine and then dark and cold, and no way to call out, and no way to drive out, and a fence that was a gesture, and a boy in the corner whose fever we still couldn't read. I heard the truck, faint over the wind, from the direction of the vehicle shed. The cough of a cold engine turning over, catching, running. Peter had made it to the truck. In a minute, he'd have the gate number. I'd chained the gate. I'd chained the perimeter gate with the padlock. But the vehicle shed had its own service road out the back of the compound that didn't go through the perimeter gate at all. And Peter had the key to the shed, and the truck would take the service road. And there was nothing between him and the valley road and the world beyond it. "He's taking the truck," Wesley said behind me. He'd come around the partition. He was staring at the empty crate. "He took the battery. Halvard, he took the radio battery." I know. That was our call out. That was Tower. That was... Wesley stopped because he'd just gotten to the same place I'd gotten to. The place where the words run out because the situation has become larger than words. The generator coughed, caught, ran ragged. The lights dipped and came back. We had minutes. Dana called from the front of the building. "Halvard, the engine. What's happening to the engine?" I came back around the partition into the light. Dana was on her feet now, cradling her wrapped hand, and the boy Sable had pushed himself up in his sleeping bag. And both of them were looking at me the way people look at the one who just went to check on the thing that's about to kill everyone. "Peter cut the fuel line and emptied the emergency crate," I said. I heard my own voice come out level, and I was distantly proud of that. "He's taken the radio battery, the flares, the sedatives, and the truck key. He's in the truck now. The engine has maybe 10 minutes of fuel left in what's in the pan before it dies." I set the 2 jerry cans I'd risked the crossing for down in the middle of the floor. "This is what we have, 40 gallons. I can get the line back on the tank and pour these in, and we'll have heat and light. But the radio's dead without that battery, and the truck's gone, and we're in this valley until someone comes looking for us. And nobody's coming looking for us until the study misses a check-in, and the next check-in isn't until Thursday." It was Monday night. Tuesday morning, technically, by then. Dana closed her eyes. When she opened them, she'd done the same math I had. 3 days. 3 days, I said. "Here's the thing I keep coming back to. And I'm going to put it to you now because this is where it lives for me. Peter didn't need to take the radio battery to escape. He had the truck. He was leaving. The truck alone got him out clean. But he took the battery anyway. He took the one thing that would let the people he was leaving behind call for help. And he took it on his way out the door. There's a name for a man who not only saves himself, but reaches back to make sure the people he's abandoning can't be saved either. And I've never been able to decide what that name is. Tell me what you'd call him. Tell me what you'd have done to Peter Lund if he'd been standing in that room when I came back around the partition. I've had 11 months, and I still don't have a clean answer. We had work to do, and the work was the only thing that kept the three of us from coming apart. I got down on the wet concrete and I reconnected the fuel line to the shut-off valve while the generator coughed and stumbled above me. My hands were bad from the cold and worse from the arthritis, and I dropped the hose clamp twice. And each time the engine lost another beat. And Wesley knelt down next to me and held the light and held the line steady. And neither of us said anything because there was nothing to say that would help. I got the clamp seated. I opened the valve. And then Wesley cracked the cap on the first jerry can, and we fed the day tank by hand, both of us tilting 40 pounds of diesel into a funnel, while the wind screamed at the walls, and the engine caught the fresh fuel and steadied, and the lights came up strong and clean, and the heat started to build again in the steel box. We'd bought ourselves the 3 days. Or the fuel for them anyway. Whether we'd survive the 3 days was a different question. And it had a fence and a ridge, and a boy in a sleeping bag, all tangled up in it. Dana redid the count out loud, the way I had, the way we all kept doing that night. Because counting was the only control any of us had left. 4 of us, you, me, Wesley, and him. She nodded at Sable. Corinne in the clinic, gone. Peter gone with the truck. 2 dead kids out in the snow. Emmett and the man on the trail we never saw. And a pack on the ridge that's turned. How many in the pack? I said to Wesley. He was the one who knew the animals. Northern pack was 11 collared plus pups, Wesley said. But if it's spreading through them the way it spread through everything else. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The sickness didn't kill its hosts and leave a smaller pack behind. It turned them and kept them upright and hunting. 11 wolves that no longer felt fear, drawn to a bowl of light and warmth and the smell of blood from Corinne's wound and Sable's bite, held back by a 4-foot chain-link fence and a padlocked gate that I already knew wouldn't hold. That was when the boy spoke for the first time since I'd arrived. You should put me outside, Sable said. We all turned. His voice was thin and cracked from fever and cold, but it was clear, and his eyes were clear, which I noted the way you note everything about a person who might be turning. Corinne had said the eyes went first. You've got 3 days, he said, in a warm room, if the smell of me is what's drawing them. And if I'm going to turn anyway, then every hour I'm in here, I'm the reason they keep coming. And I'm the thing that ends it for all of you the second I go. You should put me out. Now, while I can still ask you to. Nobody said anything. The generator hummed. Dana looked at the boy for a long moment, and then she said gently, the way you'd talk to someone standing on the ledge. We don't know that you're turning. Corinne would have known. Corinne could have tested. But Corinne's... She stopped. We don't know. And I'm not putting a kid out in the snow on a maybe. It's not a maybe, Sable said, and he pulled back the sleeping bag and rolled up his sleeve. And on his forearm was the bite. And around the bite, the flesh had gone a color I'd never seen on a living person. Dark and spreading in fine lines under the skin like ink dropped in water, tracking up toward his elbow. It's not a maybe. It went in shallow, but it went in. I've watched it move up my arm all night. I can feel it in my shoulder now. When it gets to my neck, Emmett's went to his neck. And then his eyes changed. And then he was on your vet. I don't want to be the thing that's on you. His voice broke. Please. I walked 2 days to find people. I found you. Don't make me be the thing that kills you. And there it was. The real weight of the whole night. Sitting in the corner of a generator shed in a sleeping bag, 19 years old, asking us to do the humane thing to him before the sickness made him inhuman. Peter Lund had run from this exact math. He'd looked at this boy and this fever and this bite, and he'd decided he didn't want to be in the room when the arithmetic came due. So he'd taken the fuel and the key and left the rest of us holding it. And now the boy himself was doing the thing Peter couldn't, staring straight at the number and saying it out loud. I want to tell you what we decided. But first, I want to be honest about something. In that moment, I understood Peter Lund better than I have ever wanted to understand anyone. Not forgave, understood. Because there is a version of survival that is just arithmetic. And if you let yourself see the whole night as nothing but numbers, fuel and rounds and bodies and hours, then everything Peter did was correct. Every single thing. He maximized his own survival by minimizing everyone else's claim on the resources. That's not evil. That's optimization. The evil is only in the part of you that knows the numbers aren't the whole thing, and does it anyway. Peter had killed that part of himself sometime before I walked in the door. The boy in the corner had that part of himself so alive, it was going to get him to volunteer for the snow. And somewhere between those two was where the rest of us had to actually stand and make a choice. Dana made it. She was the lead. It was hers to make, and she made it. You stay inside, she said to Sable. You stay inside and you stay warm, and if you turn, we'll deal with it. And until you turn, you're a person, and persons stay inside. That's the whole rule. I'm not going to save my own life by throwing away the last thing that makes it worth saving. Peter did that. Look how it went for Peter. She said it fierce and flat and final. And the boy started to cry, quiet. And she went and sat down next to him with her one good hand, and that was the end of the discussion. I loved her a little in that moment. In the way you love someone who does the thing you were too much of a coward to do first. But loving her didn't change the arithmetic, and the arithmetic had a new term in it now, because while Dana was making her stand, I had been watching the small window. And in the small window, out in the blue-white dark of the compound, I had seen the fence gate move. Not the wolf against the wire, the gate itself. The padlocked swing gate that I had chained shut with my own hands 20 minutes before. It was moving. I went to the window without a word, and Wesley came with me, and we stood shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the compound. And there it was. There were 3 of them at the gate now. 3 collared wolves, silent, pressed against the swing gate all at once, and the gate was flexing inward against the chain, and the chain was holding. But the post the gate hung on was a steel pipe set in the ground 2 winters ago, by people who'd never imagined anything would push on it harder than a curious animal, and the post was starting to lean. The post, Wesley said quietly, not the fence. The post's going to come out of the ground before the chain breaks. He was right. I'd set that post myself. 2 feet of it in the frozen ground, back filled with gravel. Plenty for a gate that only ever had to swing. Not plenty for 300 pounds of silent muscle throwing itself against the gate over and over, without pause, without fear, without the self-preservation that would make a normal animal stop when the wire tore its flesh. They'd worry that post out of the frozen ground, the way you work a fence stake loose, back and forth, back and forth. And when it came out, the gate would open and the compound would be theirs. "How long?" Dana said from the corner. She hadn't moved, but she'd heard. "I don't know," I said. "An hour, maybe less. Depends how hard the ground is." "And then?" "And then they're in the compound," I said. "And this building has one door, and it's steel, and it holds. As long as we're behind it, we're all right. As long as nobody has to open it." But we did have to open it, and everyone in that room knew it, because the day tank held 2 jerry cans worth of fuel and no more. And I'd poured both cans in, and 40 gallons at the rate that engine burned in this cold was hours, not days. To make it to Thursday, we needed the main fuel store. And the main fuel store was in the shed. And the shed was across the open compound, on the far side of the ground that 3 sick wolves were about to inherit. Peter had known that too. That was the part I kept arriving at, over and over, in the 11 months since. Peter Lund had done his arithmetic so completely that he'd understood something the rest of us only caught up to slowly. He'd understood that the generator building wasn't a refuge. It was a trap with a clock on it. Safe as long as the fuel lasted and the door stayed shut. Minutes, and the fuel wouldn't last. And to get more, you had to open the door and cross the ground. And the ground was about to belong to the pack. He'd looked at all of that, and he'd taken the one thing that lets you leave the trap entirely, the truck key, and he'd left the rest of us sealed inside it. He hadn't abandoned us in a safe place. He'd abandoned us in a box that was going to become a coffin at whatever hour the diesel ran out, and he'd taken the door with him. I turned away from the window. "We need the fuel from the shed," I said. "And we need it before that post comes out. Once the pack's inside the fence, the crossing's over. Nobody makes it to the shed and back with a pack loose in the compound." "So, one of us goes now," Wesley said. "One of us goes now," I agreed. "While they're all bunched at the gate. If they're all pushing on the gate, the middle of the compound's clear. Whoever goes has a window, as long as the post holds and the pack stays focused on the gate instead of the shed." "And the rifle's got 1 round," Wesley said. "The rifle's got 1 round," I said, "which is why whoever goes doesn't fight. Whoever goes runs the fuel and gets back inside before that post comes out. And the 1 round is for the thing you absolutely cannot get past and nothing else." Dana stood up. "I'll go." "No," I said, and Wesley said it at the same time, and even the boy in the corner said no. "Your hand's torn open," I said. "You're bleeding through the gauze. You're the smell that's drawing them worse than any of us. The second you're out that door, you're the most interesting thing in the compound. It can't be you." "It can't be you either," Dana said. "You went last time. You're spent. Look at your hands." She was right about my hands. I looked down at them, and they were shaking so hard I couldn't have worked the fuel pump handle. Not out there, not fast enough. 19 winters and the cold had finally found the joints, and it wasn't going to give them back tonight. "It's me," Wesley said. Quiet, certain, the way he'd been about everything since I'd known him. "I read the snow, and I read the animals, and I'm the fastest one in this room. And I don't have a torn hand, and my fingers still work. It's me. And Halvard's right. It's the gate that matters. As long as they're on the gate, I've got a lane straight down the middle to the shed. I fill 1 can, I come back, we do it again if the window's still open. 1 can at a time, in and out. I didn't want it to be him. He was 25 years old, and he'd let a freezing kid in the door 2 days ago, because it was the decent thing to do. And now here he was, volunteering to run across a compound full of the consequences. But he was right, and the fuel wouldn't wait, and the post was leaning further every time I looked, and someone had to go. And it couldn't be the man with the shaking hands, or the woman who was bleeding, or the boy who was turning. "One can," I said. "You fill one can, and you come straight back. You don't get greedy. If that post starts to give while you're out there, you drop the can, and you run for the door, and we let you in, and we forget about the fuel. A can of diesel isn't worth you. You hear me? It isn't worth you." "I hear you," Wesley said. He was already at the door, pulling on the gear I'd brought in, my spare gloves, my second hat. I put the rifle in his hands. One round. I showed him the safety, and he nodded. He already knew. Corinne had taught him. "Wesley," Dana said. He looked at her. "Straight down the middle," she said. "Straight there and straight back. Don't be a hero. We've had enough of people doing math tonight. Just come back." He almost smiled. Then Wesley O'Teen went out the door into the storm to cross a compound with 3 sick wolves worrying a fence post out of the frozen ground. And Wesley O'Teen did not come back the way we planned. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, because I watched it through that small window, and because it's the part of the night I owe him. The window gave me a view of maybe 2/3 of the compound. The gate and the shed were both in frame off to the right. Wesley went out the side door, and I lost him for a few seconds along the wall. And then he came into the window's view, low and fast, moving straight across the middle of the open ground exactly the way he'd said. The 3 wolves were still at the gate. I could see them, silent, throwing themselves against the swing gate. And I could see the post leaning. And I could see Wesley crossing behind them. 40 feet, 30 feet, closing on the shed. And for one whole beautiful second, I thought it was going to work exactly the way we'd drawn it up. Then a 4th wolf came over the fence. Not through the gate, over the fence. A 4-foot chain-link fence that no healthy wolf would ever bother to jump because there was never any reason to. And this one hit it at a dead run, and went up and over and tore its belly open on the top of the wire doing it, and didn't slow down, didn't feel it. Hit the snow on the inside of the compound, and rolled up onto its feet, and it was inside. Inside the fence, inside the perimeter, 30 feet from Wesley. And Wesley was between it and the shed, with 1 round in the rifle. I heard myself say his name into the glass, uselessly, 40 feet away behind a steel wall. Wesley heard it too, or heard something, the animals landing maybe. And he turned, and I watched him do the thing I'd told him to do, and the thing that killed our plan, in the same motion. He raised the rifle. He put the 1 round into the wolf that had come over the fence, and he put it in clean, center mass, at 15 feet, and the wolf dropped. And it was the best shot a man could make, under the worst pressure I've ever seen. And it was also the last round we had. And the sound of it did exactly what the sound of a rifle does in a compound full of turned animals. It brought the rest of them off the gate. The 3 at the gate came off the fence and turned as one toward the noise, toward the middle of the compound, toward Wesley standing there with an empty rifle and a jerry can he hadn't even reached yet. And the whole geometry of the night changed in a single second. The lane down the middle was gone. The pack wasn't focused on the gate anymore. The pack was focused on the man in the open. "Open the door," I said, already moving. "Wesley, run. Open the door, Wesley. Drop it and run." He dropped the rifle. He didn't run for the shed. Even then, even with 3 of them turning toward him, some part of Wesley O'Teen's mind was still working the problem. And he understood in that instant that he couldn't outrun them to the generator door with them already turned and already moving. that they'd take him in the open before he made it. And he did the only thing left that had any math in it at all. He ran for the shed. The shed was closer than the generator door, and the shed had a door, and the shed had a lock. He made the shed. I watched him make the shed. 3 wolves closing the distance behind him, faster than I can tell it. And he got the door open and got inside and got it shut. And I heard it slam even through the wind and the wall. And then the 3 wolves hit that shed door, and the shed door held, because it was a good door on a good building. And Wesley O'Teen was alive. Inside the fuel shed 40 feet away, with 3 turned wolves throwing themselves against the door, and a 4th over the fence dead in the snow, and no rifle, and no radio, and no way for us to reach him. We were in the generator building. He was in the shed. Between us was open ground that now belonged entirely to the pack. And a 4th wolf had shown us that the fence meant nothing, that they'd come over it and tear themselves open to do it. And there were more than 4. There were as many as the sickness had taken from a pack of 11. And some of them were still up on the ridge. And the ones that were down here were now spread across the compound between the 2 buildings. And the whole careful geometry we'd built the night on was gone. Dana was at the window next to me. "He's in the shed," she said. "He's alive. He's in the shed." "He's in the shed," I said. "With all the fuel," she said, and I heard the terrible hope in it, and I heard her understand the shape of it a half second after she said it. He was in the shed, with all the fuel, and we were in the generator building, running down what was in the day tank, with the only man who could have run fuel to us now sealed in the fuel store itself, with wolves on the door, and no way to cross to him, and no way for him to cross to us. The radio. We didn't even have the radio to talk to him. Peter had taken the battery. Wesley had the handheld no. I looked. The handheld was on the floor by the door where Wesley had been getting geared up. He'd left it. In the rush, he'd left the handheld, and it didn't matter anyway, because Peter had the base radio's battery and the handheld's range was nothing. And even if it had range, there was no one out there to hear it, not until Thursday. 2 buildings, 1 man in each fuel source, a pack loose in the compound, and a boy in the corner behind us whose fever was climbing toward his neck. I picked up the handheld off the floor. I thumbed it on. The battery indicator showed 2 bars. Short range, but Wesley was 40 feet away. I keyed it. "Wesley, it's Halvard. If you've got your handset, key it twice." Static. Then, faint, 2 clicks. He had it. He'd carried the handheld out clipped to his coat the way Peter had carried the other one. And he had it in the shed with him, and we could talk. "You hurt?" I said. 2 clicks. "No." Then his voice came through, tight and low, and behind it I could hear the wolves on the shed door. "I'm okay. Door's holding. There's 3 on it. Halvard, there's more coming down off the ridge. I can hear them. I can see the tree line from the shed window, and they're coming down." I looked at Dana. Dana looked at me, and the boy in the corner said, in his cracked, fever voice, "Now do you understand why you should have put me outside? I want to be careful how I tell this next part, because it's the part where the whole night turned from survival into something I've never found a clean word for. And I don't want to make it sound braver or wiser than it was. We were 3 people and a dying boy in a steel box, and a 4th person alive in a shed we couldn't reach, and a pack coming down off a ridge, and a traitor an hour gone. In our only truck with our only radio battery, and Thursday was 3 days away. I keyed the handheld. "Wesley, how much fuel can you move at once?" Static. Then, "What?" "You've got the whole fuel store," I said. "We've got the generator and maybe 5 hours of day tank." You can't cross to us, and we can't cross to you. But we don't both need to survive in the same building. We need the generator running, and we need you alive. And right now, those are in two different places. I stopped. I could hear my own heart in the little speaker's silence. I'm going to say a hard thing. Tell me if I'm wrong. Say it, Wesley said. The generator doesn't have to be here, I said. There's a second generator. The little portable one, the 2,000 watt. It's in the shed, with you. It runs off the same diesel you're sitting on top of. It won't heat this building, but it'll run a light, and it'll keep you alive in that shed for as long as the fuel lasts, which is days, because you're sitting in the whole store. You don't need to reach us. You need to survive where you are until someone comes. And we need to survive where we are until someone comes. Two buildings, two problems. We solve them separately. Silence on the handheld. Then Dana next to me, quiet. And when our day tank runs out in 5 hours? That was the arithmetic. That was the whole thing, laid bare. The same math Peter had done and run from, and the same math the boy had done and volunteered for. Two buildings. The shed had all the fuel and one man who could survive in it for days. The generator building had 3 people and a dying boy and 5 hours of heat, and no way to get more fuel across a compound full of wolves. The numbers did not work for 4 people. The numbers worked for 1. I understood, standing there with the handheld in my shaking hand, that the sickness on the ridge and the traitor in the truck had between them arranged a problem with only one clean solution, and that the clean solution was the thing the boy had been asking for all along, and the thing Peter had chosen for himself, and the thing Dana had refused with everything she had an hour ago. Somebody survives. Not everybody. The night had been narrowing toward that the whole time, and I'd been too busy running fuel and chaining gates to see it narrowing. No, Dana said. She said it to the room, to the handheld, to me, to the boy, to the whole shape of the thing. No, we are not doing the math. We stopped doing the math when I told the boy he stays inside. Wesley survives in the shed. That's not a sacrifice. That's just true. He's in the safest building with the most fuel, and we send him there, and he lives. And the 3 of us in here, we make 5 hours into more than 5 hours, and we make it to Thursday, and everyone lives. That's the plan. Everyone lives. I'm done with any plan where the answer is, somebody doesn't. Dana. I kept my voice low. There isn't enough fuel in this building to reach Thursday. There's 5 hours. That's not a spirit problem. That's a volume problem. 5 hours. Then we cross to the shed, she said. All of us. We go to Wesley. We go to the fuel and the strong door, and we all wait it out together in the one building that can actually keep us alive. Across a compound full of pack, I said. With a woman who's bleeding, and a boy who's turning, and a man whose hands don't work, Dana, we can't cross. That's why Wesley's stuck over there. Nobody crosses now. And she knew it. I watched her know it. Dana Chorney was the smartest person in that valley, and she'd fought 3 funding bodies and read every wolf by its gait, and she looked out that window at the pack spreading across the compound, and she knew that there was no crossing, that the fuel in the shed could not come to us, and we could not go to it, and that 5 hours was 5 hours, and that the arithmetic she had refused all night had followed her into the last room and sat down across from her, and was not going to leave. Here is where I have to stop and put it to you straight, because it's the decision the whole night was built to force, and I've never told anyone how it actually went. 2 buildings, one with the fuel and a strong door, and one man who lives no matter what we do. One with 3 people and a dying boy, and 5 hours. No crossing, no radio, no truck. 3 days until anyone comes. If you're in that generator building, with Donna refusing to do the math and the boy begging you to do it, and the diesel gauge dropping, what do? Don't answer fast. I answered fast that night, and I've had 11 months to wish I'd answered slower. Tell me in the comments. I read them. I read all of them, looking for the answer I didn't find in the shed. We didn't cross. That much I'll tell you plainly. We didn't cross because crossing was death. And Dana knew it, even as she said it. What we did instead was smaller and stranger. And it's the thing I actually want you to carry out of this story. I got back on the handheld to Wesley. The little generator. Is it there? The 2,000 watt. It's here. Is there fuel line, spare hose, anything long in the shed? A pause. I could hear him moving, hear the wolves still working the door behind him. There's the transfer hose, the long one, off the main tank, maybe 50 feet of it. 50 feet. The shed to the generator building was 40. Wesley, I said, I need you to listen, and I need you to do exactly what I say. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to take everything you've got. And if it works, everybody lives. Nobody does the math. You understand me? Nobody does the math tonight. Tell me, Wesley said. I told him. The transfer hose off the main tank in the shed was 50 feet long, and it was built to move diesel under a hand pump. The shed had a window on the side that faced the generator building. The generator building had the maintenance hatch on its north side, but it also had the small front window, and the small front window faced the shed. 40 feet of open ground between 2 windows, with a 50-foot hose. If Wesley could feed the hose out the shed window, and if one of us could get it in through our window, we could pump fuel across the compound without anyone setting foot on the ground the pack owned. We could keep the day tank full from the shed store, 40 feet away, through a hose strung across the open air, while the wolves ran the ground underneath it and never understood what was passing over their heads. The problem was the 40 feet. A hose doesn't cross 40 feet of open air by itself. Someone had to get the end of it from Wesley's window to ours, and the only thing that crosses open ground without a body attached to it is something you throw. The flare gun, Wesley said, over the handheld. And I heard him understand it before I even got there. There's a line throwing kit for the fuel spills. It's a weighted line. It's in the spill kit. It's right here. If I tie the transfer hose to the throw line and fire the throw line at your window, you can put a weighted line 40 feet, I said. Straight and flat, into a broken window, in this wind. I put a rifle round into a wolf at 15 feet a minute ago, Wesley said. And there was something in his voice that hadn't been there since I'd arrived. Something that was almost the calm young man who read snow. I can put a throw line into a window. It took him 3 tries. I'm not going to pretend it went clean. The first throw fell short, and we heard the weight hit the snow and heard the pack go for the noise. And my heart stopped, and Wesley had to haul the line back in through the window hand over hand, while 3 wolves tore at the ground where it had landed. The second throw hit the wall a foot below our window and dropped. The third throw came in through the broken pane where the boy's sable had punched out the no. Where the bunk room window had, I'm getting my windows crossed, forgive me, 11 months. And I still see all of them at once. The third throw came in through the generator building's front window that Dana had knocked the glass from. And the weighted end landed on the concrete floor between us, with a sound like a dropped wrench. And Dana had it in her one good hand before it stopped rolling. We hauled the line in. The transfer hose came with it, snaking out of the shed window and across 40 feet of open compound, and in through our window, a black line strung over the heads of a pack that milled and threw itself at doors, and never once looked up. Wesley set the hand pump at his end, at the main tank, and I got our end into the day tank's fill. And Wesley pumped, and diesel came across the compound through a 50-foot hose from a man we couldn't reach to people he couldn't cross to. And the day tank filled, and the generator ran clean and strong, and the heat held. We made it to Thursday. I'll tell you the shape of the rest quickly, because the long, dark middle of it was just waiting. And waiting doesn't tell well, though God knows it lives long. The boy did not turn that night, or the next day. The dark lines on his arm climbed to his shoulder and stopped, and the fever broke on the second day. And Corinne, before the clinic, Corinne had said once that a shallow bite might not carry enough of the passenger to take hold in a body as big as a person's. That dose might matter. That the man on the trail who bit Emmett deep had doomed him, and the graze on Sable's arm might not. She'd been right about everything else. She was right about that. The boy lived. His name really was Sable Andrusek. And he sends me a message every year now on the anniversary. And I never know what to write back. Corinne did not come out of the clinic. I won't tell you more than that. Peter had closed the door on her. And whatever she became on the other side of it stayed on the other side of it. And when the county came in on Thursday, they dealt with the clinic, and they dealt with the pack, and they set up the perimeter that's out there now, the real perimeter, the one with the hard walls and the men who understand what they're keeping in. The valley's closed now. You've probably seen that in the news, or you will. They don't call it what it is. They call it a wildlife health closure. Corinne would have laughed at that, dry as sandpaper. They found the truck 2 days later, 30 miles down the valley road, in a ditch, engine cold, driver's door open. No Peter. The radio battery was still in the truck, the spare, fully charged, the one that would have let us call Tower, sitting in the passenger seat where he'd tossed it because once he was clear of us, it was just weight. They found the flares and the sedatives in the truck, too. He'd taken all of it and used none of it. He'd taken our means of survival, not because he needed it, but because taking it meant we couldn't use it against the arithmetic he'd already solved in our favor of 1. Him. Just him. They never found Peter Lund. His paperwork was forged, the pipeline reroute study didn't exist, and the name was a name and nothing else. My best guess, and it's only a guess, is that a man who did that much math still got the last variable wrong, which is that a compound full of turned wolves is not the most dangerous thing in a valley in February. The cold is. The cold doesn't do arithmetic, and it doesn't take bribes, and it doesn't care what you took from the people you left behind. He walked out of a warm truck into 30 miles of open valley in the dark, carrying nothing that would keep him warm because he'd left the flares and the fuel, and told himself the truck was enough. And the truck wasn't enough once it was in a ditch. And the valley is a big cold place at night. I don't know, that's what happened. But I've spent 19 winters in that valley. And I know what it does to a man who's alone and thinks he's smarter than it. That's the part I keep coming back to. And it's the last thing I'll leave you with. Peter Lund did the math perfectly. Every number was right. Fuel, rounds, key, radio. The whole cold calculation of who survives when there isn't enough to go around. And Dana Chorney refused to do the math at all. Refused it right to the end. Said everybody lives. And then actually found the way to make everybody live. A hose across 40 feet of open air over the heads of a pack. A way that only existed because she wouldn't accept that somebody had to be left out of the count. Peter took our radio, so we couldn't be saved. And we saved each other anyway. with a throw line and a 50-foot hose and a young man's steady hands. And the man who trusted only his own arithmetic walked out into the dark alone. And the arithmetic couldn't keep him warm. So here's what I've never been able to answer, and I'm giving it to you, because you've stayed with me through the whole long night of it, and you've earned the question. If Peter Lund had still been in that room when I came around the partition and saw that empty crate, 3 rounds of our own ammunition in his pocket, and the truck key in his fist, and the fuel line cut, and the radio battery gone, what would you have done to him? Not what should have been done. What would you, standing there, with your people freezing, and a pack coming down off the ridge, have actually done to the man who did the math and left you out of it? I've had 11 months. I still don't know. Tell me, I'll be reading. And if this is the kind of story that keeps you up in the good way, the way that makes you check your own locks and count your own fuel, then you know where to find me. There are more nights in that valley I haven't told yet. Stay warm out there. Keep your count honest. And if a stranger ever hands you a rifle too easily, check the magazine before you thank him.